न च प्राणसंज्ञो न वै पञ्चवायुः न वा सप्तधातुर्न वा पञ्चकोशः.
Se eu pudesse trincar a terra toda e sentir ele um paladar, e se a terra fosse uma coisa para trincar, seria mais feliz momento.
एक बात होठों तक है जो आई नहीं, बस आंखों से है झांकती.
You're listening to Speaking of Language, a podcast recorded at the Language Resource Center at Cornell University. Each week, we explore a topic related to language pedagogy and second language acquisition. This week, on Speaking of Language,
we recap the LRC's annual multilingual sweet poetry event with organizer Hilary Yarger and participating reader Vishnu Pusarapu.
Welcome to a new episode of Speaking of Language. I'm Angelica Kramer, the director of the Language Resource Center at Cornell University.
And I'm Sam Lupowitz, the LRC's media manager. Today, we have some participants from our recent Sweet Poetry event in our studio. We look forward to hearing more from them about the event, the importance of multilingualism, and the sweetness of poetry. Welcome to Speaking of Language, Hilary and Vishnu.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Hey, Sam. It's great to be here. Thank you.
So let's start out by having each of you introduce yourself. What do you do at Cornell, and what did your path with languages look like? Hilary, why don't you get us started?
Sure. My name is Hilary Yarger, and I work here at the Language Resource Center. I'm the engagement and outreach coordinator, and I helped organize the Sweet Poetry event this year. My path with languages is pretty broad. I've studied quite a few different languages throughout my time, but I think most recently I focused mostly on Mandarin, but I've studied a little bit of Japanese or Latin or, yes, even Spanish, like in some of my early years.
Nice. Wonderful. Vishnu, what about you?
Hey, guys. My name is Vishnu, and I'm a graduate student at Cornell in the Chemical Engineering Department. And I recently became involved with the Language Resource Center by doing conversation hours in Irish and Telugu. And my experience with language started when I was pretty young, my native language being Telugu. But the place which I grew up in was Ireland. So
Nice.
I picked up the Irish language at school, and I grew quite fond of it. And
It's wonderful.
also, I've done a bit of French and Hindi, which is another language from India. That's about it.
Nice.
Hilary, this was the second annual Sweet Poetry event and the first time you ran the event. Please tell us more about Sweet Poetry.
Yes, Sweet Poetry is a very exciting event. First off, the event is held in April to celebrate National Poetry Month. And this event is essentially a space where students came together to present poems in numerous different languages. I believe we had 17 different unique languages at the event and over 20 participants, which is super amazing. And it's really just meant to be a fun space where students were able to share a language they engage with in numerous different ways, whether it's a heritage language, a native language, a language they study, experience, and all of that. So it was a really fun event, and I was so happy to be there just to experience so many languages at once, because I also find at Cornell and schools in general, there's times where you don't have the opportunity to hear so many different languages all at the same time.
Absolutely.
And so I found that a really unique aspect of this event.
Terrific. And I wanted to ask about something that's a specific area of interest for me. What makes the event sweet?
Oh, yes, of course. The sweet aspect is that we had a lovely display of desserts during the event. So people were able to enjoy sweets while listening to a really amazing arrangement of poetry.
That's awesome. Vishnu, why did you decide to participate, and how did you select the poem that you read for us?
Yeah, for sure. So I really wanted to spread some awareness of the Irish language. That's why I chose a poem in Irish, because it's quite an uncommon language around here, and I feel like people don't really know much about it. So that's why I chose that language. And the poem specifically is actually a poem that I studied in school as well as part of the Irish curriculum in high school. You have a speaking exam, so you actually have to read poetry during the exam to an examiner in one-on-one, and you get marked on the pronunciation and everything. So I had practiced reading that poem before, and it's a very special poem to me.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the meaning? Like, what was the poem about?
Yeah, so the poem was about, it's called My Own Love in English, Mograsa. And the meaning is like, it's a woman who is talking about her partner, and even though he's not like the most beautiful or the person in the world, she appreciates like his kindness and honesty, and it's just about that like special feeling of love.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Vishnu, would you like to read your poem for us now on the air?
Yeah, definitely. I'll go for it. So the poem is called Mograsa by Nuala ní Gonal. Níl Mograsa mar bhlach na narni, a bhíon ning ardín nó a chránar be. Is mata aon ghuailige le nóníní, sas a cluasa a ásí siad, nar a bhaid sé uchtdrig sias. Ní héin glasha ceolver iad a hula, taid ro congarach da chéile an gédal sias. Is mas slim é siada, tá ribí a chruiga, mar van gov Shakespeare ina wire delganí. Ach is cuma sin, tugan sé dum ula, is nor bhíonn sé in neag uver cuira finuna.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I love
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much.
Hilary, what poems stood out to you during the event? Anyone in particular or anything special that you remember from the event?
You know, yeah, I think it's so challenging to pick a favorite because I really enjoyed all of them. But I will say something that really stood out to me is the different kinds of poems included. For example, I thought it was really amazing that Spanish was an original piece with just a lot of beautiful imagery in it. Japanese was a haiku poem based off of the solar eclipse that recently happened, and I thought that was really creative as well. I also really enjoyed viewing the performance of ASL because I personally haven't had a lot of opportunities to engage with ASL as a language, and so I really appreciated that too. So I think to me those were kind of the standouts.
Yeah. Sam, did you have anything that was special for you?
I know. I was really struck by, I know you mentioned how many different poems and languages and participants there were, but something that really struck me was the handful of readers who performed poems in different languages. There was one really, I thought, stunning performance. I believe it was one of the first poems of the evening that was in Polish and read very dramatically and with great intent. And then that same reader came back up later to read a poem in French that also had singing in it, and it was just a really beautiful display of just the wealth of talent and thoughtfulness and multilingualism of the students we have here. So that was one of the things I enjoyed most about the event.
Yeah, the Sanskrit performance was also a singing type of performance, which was really cool. And actually, the closing poem was really cool too. This was also an original by a student who is studying French and also speaks Mandarin. And that gave me a good chuckle because it was about spring arriving on campus in Ithaca. Only for that student to realize that was just a joke. Spring really hasn't arrived yet. Winter is still here. So the poem was titled The Fourth Season, and it was kind of a cheeky explanation around the craziness of weather in Ithaca. But yeah, we certainly had a wonderful lineup. Many talented students who shared their heritage and their love for language. So at the LRC, we obviously care about languages, multilingualism, and all things global. As multilingual speakers yourselves, why do you think proficiency in other languages is important? Vishnu, what's your thought on that?
I think that knowing different languages can really help you to connect with people in a different way that's unique, especially if you learn a language someone else is a native speaker and they're often able to like express their thoughts and emotions in a different way and much more clearly in a way that doesn't exist in English sometimes even. I think it's really cool to know many languages.
Hilary, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. For me as well, as somebody who has really only spoken English as my native language, I realize that as I engage with other languages, I'm able to learn more about the culture as well. And I feel like that's allowed me to better connect with people, sometimes even on a deeper level than just the words I learn in that language.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that aspect is really important for me.
That's great.
What about you, Angelica? I know not to turn the tables on you, but we're getting near the end of an academic year, and you're a speaker of multiple languages, and here you are directing a language resource center. What do you say to that question?
Yeah, I do think. I mean, the world is shrinking, right? I do think we interact with people from different backgrounds, and having the ability to speak with someone in their first language definitely allows you to connect with that person on a deeper level, understand them maybe differently. I think that's why spending time abroad is so crucially important. It opens your eyes, it opens your minds, it opens your hearts. And I just think everybody should be multilingual. I think we would be better people if we all knew the struggles that it takes to learn a different language, to speak a different language, to move to a different country and find your way despite language barriers and other barriers. So here is our call for all of our listeners to, summer break is coming up, pick up another language. May it be your second, third, fourth, 10th. Do it and then report back to us.
We eagerly await
Indeed.
your experiences and results.
So we do.
What would any of you tell your friends about why they should study another language?
That's a tough question. I feel like there's so many reasons in my mind, but probably just cycling back to kind of what I said earlier, just being able to relate to people in a different kind of way. And I think it can help just make more friends, just build trust among people as well. Because sometimes I feel like my experience with language and culture has allowed me to be kind of like a safe person, you could say, for certain people. I have a lot of friends who are international students from all different countries. And I feel like when I engage with them, they know that like they can ask me questions and that I can ask them questions. And there's this mutual sense of trust, I feel, that's
awesome.
sometimes different.
Yep, it's beautiful.
To get started with a new language, you need some motivation as well. And that could be like learning a language for a country that you really want to visit, learning that language so that you can go there and experience more about the culture through the language of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you tell your friends why they should participate in Sweet Poetry next year?
I think there's a lot of reasons to participate in Sweet Poetry. For one, it's a very creative event, and I think it really brings out the creative and fun side of language beyond just learning sentences and text and that sort of thing. So I think any interested poets are welcome to participate, or people, who just have any general interest in poetry. And I think it allows us to engage with language in a different kind of way. And
for sure.
And and I also think it's a fun community space where students can engage with people who have interests in all different languages, and that can be very unique as well. So
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think it's a ton of fun, and just listening to people speaking from all the languages at once was a very interesting experience. And there's like there's different ways of conveying emotions in different languages, and they all sound so unique. That's what makes it so interesting for me.
Yeah, and what was fun for me too, the feedback we received. I mean, this is something that a lot of the participants or just the audience members echoed too. that it was really fun to hear all these different languages that normally they would never find in one confined space in such a short amount of time. I also really loved how the community came together and how faculty members supported their students, how staff members were there to support their students, and how friends and even family were there. One of the readers, she brought basically her own little fan club. And there were so many just friends and cheering on, their peers and supporting them. And I thought that was a really nice aspect of this event as well.
Well, it's been lovely to recap Sweet Poetry with the two of you, and looking forward to next year's event. But before we sign off, we would like to ask each of you to share a word in a language you speak, love, are learning, want to learn, that doesn't exist in English, but you wish it did. What comes to mind?
I can start. I was featured on the podcast earlier, and I think my word stands strong. I think my favorite word truly is ma. It's a word in Japanese that means emptiness, but not in the same way as English. It's more of a philosophical emptiness, or more a kind of meaning in emptiness or nothing. And I think about that word a lot, and it will continue and always be my favorite.
Okay. Vishnu, what about you?
So for me, a word that comes to mind is an Irish word, and it's crack, spelled C-R-A-I-C, which is different to the crack in English. In Irish, it means like kind of a vibe or fun. So you can ask someone, what's the crack? And that means like, what's up? Or also like, we're having good crack can also mean that we're just having a good time in general.
Nice. I like that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for speaking of language with us today, Hilary and Vishnu.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's been great.
That wraps up our semester of conversations about all things language and culture. But if you're feeling brave, stay tuned next week for a final bonus 13th episode to round out our 13th season.
If you dare.
Until then.
Auf Wiederhören.
The Language Resource Center is located on the ground floor of Stimson Hall on Cornell's main campus in Ithaca, New York. Check us out on the web at lrc.cornell.edu.
And follow Cornell LRC on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Speaking of Language is produced by Angelika Kramer and Sam Lupowitz.
Recorded by Sam Lupowitz.
Original music by Sam Lupowitz, Dan Gable, and Joe Gibson.
Thanks also to the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University.
As a reminder, the ideas and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the College of Arts and Sciences or any other official entity of Cornell University.
We thank our listeners, and do stay tuned for our next episode.